Hey there, Chiefs Kingdom. Harrison Graham here with another episode of the Chiefs Report by Chat Sports. Speaking of the NFL draft, we've been talking about it recently. Draft hats, get them, chatsports.com/Chiefs draft hats. All right, let's step into the first rumor here. Allen Robinson. Could Allen Robinson be a trade option for Kansas City? A report that's been out there for a while but was kind of reinforced over the past week or so is that the Rams remain open to trading Robinson this offseason. Bleacher Report linked Kansas City to the Los Angeles receiver. So here's Christopher Knox talking about this, and then we'll react of Bleacher Report. He says, Robinson could serve as a backup plan for the Chiefs if they don't land a receiver like DeAndre Hopkins and can't adequately address the position in the draft. While Robinson has struggled to produce over the past few seasons, he caught 102 passes for 1,250 yards and 6 touchdowns with the Chicago Bears back in 2020. Chicago's head coach in 2020, Matt Nagy, is now the Chiefs' offensive coordinator. Nagy knows how to get the most out of Robinson. So you read that last part, right? And you're thinking, oh, natural connection, Robinson, Nagy. They had some good years together, which they did. Not exactly the natural connection you would think, though. A lot of you know I also cover the Bears here at Chat Sports. Here's the deal. Robinson's last year in Chicago in 2021 also met Nagy's last year as the Bears head coach. Kind of had a falling out, Robinson did, with the Bears as a whole, but that included Nagy. He had a career-worst season that year at the time. He kind of just got phased out of the offense to a certain extent. Darnell Mooney became the number one option there, and he was like ready to get out of there. So I'm not sure Matt Nagy being this team's offensive coordinator necessarily would lead to A-Rob just wanting to come here. Now, that doesn't mean he wouldn't, but I don't think it's like a bonus bullet point for, oh yeah, if I'm Allen Robinson, yeah, I get to play for Nagy again. I don't necessarily think that's actually the case at all. You look at his last 4 seasons, it is very bizarre. With what's happened with A-Rob here. I mean, in 2019 and 20 with the Bears, probably the 2 best seasons of his career, at least 2 of his top 3. He had a great year in Jacksonville several years ago. You're like, oh my goodness, this guy put up like 2,400 yards, 13 touchdowns on 200 catches over 2 years playing with Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles. Then in 2021, he kind of gets phased out of the offense, and you're thinking, oh, well, rookie quarterback Justin Fields, Andy Dalton played some, just kind of a mess, just to down your right. Not really. He goes to the Rams with Matt Stafford, who I get was banged up at times and was terrible last year, at least statistically. And that really brings you to the question of, is Allen Robinson cooked? Or has he been misused with the Rams this past year? Was he misused with the Bears in 2021? It's hard to say. I mean, the last 2 years have been mind-boggling in terms of how much his production has dipped compared to 2020 and before. It really is something. Now, on paper, if you're just throwing names at people, I imagine yourself at the bar and you start throwing out names. Allen Robinson, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Sky Moore, Justin Watson, who might be re-signed, even Kadarius Toney. You're thinking, oh, Allen Robinson on paper, that's the biggest name out of all these names. But would he actually be better than a Kadarius Toney, MVS, a Sky Moore? Maybe, maybe not. It's just a tricky one to figure out, and it's especially tricky considering his cap hit's $15.25 million, even if you trade for him. That's not chump change, and especially not for a guy who simply has not played well for 2 years now. That's something you have to consider. Brett Veach is, being careful with where he's allocating money. And do you want to allocate $15+ million on your cap next year for a receiver that has real question marks, albeit talent and experience? I don't know. I like Allen Robinson. When he was at his peak, he was great. He struggles to separate at times now. I don't know. It's a tough one to figure out. What do you guys think? Would you take a chance? Would you trade for Allen Robinson? Type T for trade or P for pass? I think I got to pass with that price tag. I think there's better options out there, and if there aren't, I'd rather go in the draft if I'm being completely honest. T for trade or P for pass. Let's talk about a receiver we've talked about a bunch on this show, but with a new angle, DeAndre Hopkins. Could he get cut? Well, Albert Breer says the Cardinals could end up cutting DeAndre Hopkins, which is pretty mind-blowing to me. Here's what Albert Breer had to say on the Greg Bedard podcast over the weekend. He said some teams think that the Cardinals are going to cut him. They think the Cardinals will wind up cutting him. His market is not great right now. There's nobody who is willing to take on Hopkins' contract and pay the Cardinals' initial asking price. I just can't imagine this scenario. Now, I'm not saying Albert Breer is fake news. I'm sure he's heard from teams that, yeah, we think they might cut him, so we're just going to wait and see what they do. Now, I do think this. I do not think the Cardinals will get a second or whatever they've been asking. I mean, that's been the report, a second and then some, but even a second, I don't think they'll get. Now, Ian Rappaport, right before we went live, did mention on McAfee that he does think Hopkins will get traded, but that the contract will be altered after the trade. And I do think that probably makes sense. Like, if you're Arizona, if you're DeAndre Hopkins, if you don't want to get cut, you probably have to agree to some kind of a restructure contractually. But I still can't imagine him getting cut. Like, he's too good of a player to actually get cut. Like, Allen Robinson getting cut makes way more sense than DeAndre Hopkins. Like, Hopkins is still very good. I get the last 2 years he's only played 10 and 9 games, but Hopkins in 9 games last year had 717 yards. Allen Robinson in 10 games had less than 400. Like, DeAndre Hopkins is still a very, very good player. At absolute worst, he's a high-end number 2. I still think he's a number 1, though, for most teams. That's just my opinion. I get he's 31, but that's not ancient. I still think he's got a few years left in the tank at a very, very high level. Then I'll add this as well. Brandon Cooks, who wasn't exactly making chump change. I get less than DeAndre Hopkins, but yeah, it's not a lot. A 5th and a 6th from Houston, and you see a bit of the salary that Houston probably had to take on there, but I just got to think a team offers a day 3 pick. Like, you're telling me, like, a team like the Giants, for example, hey, we'll give you a 4th-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. Our best receiver right now is Darius Slayton. Like, there's teams out there that I believe would trade for Hopkins. Again, you would have to do some kind of a contractual restructure, and I understand that. And maybe Hopkins isn't willing to budge, which could lead to him getting cut, I suppose. But in terms of just purely thinking about it, like, at worst, this is a top 20 receiver. Like, you can't trade him for anything. I just can't imagine that's the case. I'll tell you what, though. If he gets cut, if I'm Brett Veach, I'm pouncing. I am trying to sign this man right away. Pick a wide receiver. Who would you rather go out and get? Type AR for Allen Robinson, DH for DeAndre Hopkins. I'm going Hop all day long. I think he's a better player. I think he's a better fit. I think he's got more in the tank as well. Chiefs draft hats are available. Mentioned off the top, draft less than a month away, and the draft's coming to Kansas City. So if you want to represent the Chiefs on draft night, get a hat. Chatsports.com/Chiefs draft hats. You got different styles, different color schemes, flat bill snapback. You got the curve bill. You kind of got the slightly curved bill, fitted, non-fitted. It's all available. Go check it out at the link below. It's in the comments and in the description of this video. Chiefs draft hats, chatsports.com/Chiefs draft hats. Pick one up, pick several up, rock those hats for a while. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be a hat only to wear in draft season. Like, you can rock this all year long. And these hats are clean. Chatsports.com/Chiefs draft hats. All right, this is where we get to the really part of the show. Yeah, really. How about trading for Trey Lance? 49ers appear to be open to trading Lance at this point in time. They haven't really committed to him as being a real option as their starting quarterback. Could the Chiefs buy low on him as a backup? Well, David Latham of Lost Word on Sports, I'll be honest, I haven't heard of these guys before, but Last Word on Sports put out an article and mentioned the Chiefs as a potential fit, and I thought made a somewhat intriguing point. So here's what they had to say. Obviously, Trey Lance is not going to beat out Patrick Mahomes for the starting job. However, due to the lackluster start to his career, there is a real chance that Lance will need to accept life as a backup quarterback. I agree with that. He added this: Kansas City has a great offensive system, but they'd be in a lot of trouble if Mahomes missed any amount of time. With Chad Henne retired, their backup QB is currently Shane Buechele, and that's not a good thing. Lance would be able to keep this offense afloat in a worst-case scenario. Now, let me just say this right off the rip. To even consider this, for me, it's got to be a late pick. I'm talking 5th or later. Like, I'm certainly not trading a 3rd. I don't think I'm trading a 4th. You look at the Chiefs draft picks, maybe that 2nd, 4th round pick I would consider, but even then it's like a middle round pick for a backup quarterback when you have Patrick Mahomes. I get it. I get it. The Chiefs potentially could be hesitant. Is Shane Buechele ready for this? Like, I don't know. I mean, there's a reason 36, 37-year-old Chad Henne has beaten him out the past couple of years, and they felt more comfortable with him. I would be open to buying low on Trey Lance. I just don't know what the Niners would accept in return. Like, if I'm the Niners, I probably want a day 2 pick. Would he get that? I'm not sure. When he's played, he's been very mediocre, right? 55%, 800 yards. He started 4 games. One of those, to be fair, was in an absolute monsoon week 1 last year in Chicago, so I won't hold that against him. But he is very raw, guys. I mean, this is a guy who didn't have a ton of college experience. He's not gotten to play in the NFL much because of injuries and other quarterback circumstances in San Francisco, but he is talented. I mean, the guy went number 3 overall. Like, if you could get someone like that for a 5th-round pick to be a high-level backup potentially, it's at least intriguing, but again, I'm not forcing the issue. Like, this has got to be a scenario where it's like the Niners are out of options. They're just trying to move him. Brett Veach, hey, I'll give you a 5th or a 6th, take him off your hands, and he can come compete with Shane Buechele and probably beat him out. What do you guys think? In that scenario, should the Chiefs trade for Trey Lance? Type Y for yes, type in for no. If it's cheap, I'd be open to it. Otherwise, I can look elsewhere for a backup if Shane Buechele isn't my answer.